All right, as I see people filtering into the room, I just want to give everyone a hello and welcome to today's webinar, the Cybersecurity Toolkit, Top 5 Tools Every Business Needs. It looks like we have a couple minutes before we do hit the top of the hour, so we'll just pause for a bit, and right when the top of the hour hits, we'll go ahead and get started. All right, so we have hit the top of the hour, so we'll go and get started. So again, to everyone that has recently joined, hello and welcome to today's webinar, the Cybersecurity Toolkit, the top 5 tools every business needs. My name is Matthew Formisano. I'm a product marketing specialist for the network engineering practice at LBMC Technology Solutions, and I'll be the host today. Thank you to everyone for joining. As we get started, go ahead and drop your name and location in the chat. As I said, my name is Matthew Formisano, and I'm in our Nashville, Tennessee office. Just a few housekeeping items to go over before we get started. All lines have been muted to eliminate any background noise. If you experience any technical difficulties, please let us know by using the chat panel. We will be taking questions throughout today's webinar and will answer as many as time allows, so feel free to submit your question at any time. You can do this either in the Q&A section at the bottom of your screen or using the chat panel. We do encourage you to use both the chat and the Q&A features, as there are many attendees registered for today, and you have a captive audience of users from around the country in a variety of industries. So you never know, you might be facing a challenge that someone else on here has already been through and solved. Also, we are offering CPE for this event for those of you that are eligible. In order to receive CPE, you must answer all of the poll questions. After today's event, you will be receiving an email with the slides from today's presentation, a recording, and a survey link. Please fill out the survey. It's very short and helps us improve any future webinars that we do. Now, without further ado, please help me welcome our presenters for today's webinar. First, we have Mike Serra, Systems Engineer for Arctic Wolf Networks. Mike has spent over 10 years in the IoT and security industry and works closely with both technical and sales teams as a pre-sales system engineer to deliver expertise to our customers, providing security operations solutions. Mike has navigated cyber risk challenges with many customers and brings extensive knowledge to organizations across the country. Partnering with Mike today is Bill Stevens. Bill is a technical account manager at Huntress, specializing in delivering tailored cybersecurity solutions to help businesses protect their critical assets. With over a decade of experience in IT and security, Bill excels at building strong client relationships by combining deep technical expertise with a proactive, customer-focused approach. His mission is to empower organizations with the knowledge and tools needed to stay ahead of the evolving cyber threats while maximizing the value of their security investments. And last but not least, we have Dave Roberts, Senior Manager and Virtual Chief Information Officer for LBMC Technology Solutions. Dave joined LBMC Technology Solutions in August 2017 through an acquisition where he's been serving as an outsourced CIO since October of 2011. His primary focus is providing technology strategic advisory services to clients. With a background in Fortune 500 corporate and shared services environments, he leverages his experience to bring effective solutions utilizing a combination of client, business partner, and associates resources. At LBMC, Dave leads the virtual CIO and CTO team, a group of colleagues who serve in a similar strategic leadership roles for LBMC clients. Dave currently serves in a technology strategic leadership role for clients in the financial services, energy, insurance, faith, and manufacturing sectors. Welcome, Mike, Bill, and Dave, and thank you for presenting today.
Thank you, Matthew.
Before we fully get into the tools, let's start with a quick poll. The first poll, which cybersecurity threat concerns you the most? And again, if you are wanting CPE credit, you must answer all of the poll questions. I'll leave this up for about 30 more seconds. All right, just a couple more seconds if you haven't gotten your answer in. All right. So this is how everything came out. It looks like ransomware is the highest concern so far, with phishing attacks right after it. All right, now I'm going to pass it over to Dave Roberts to help set the stage for the webinar.
Great. Thank you, Matthew. Good morning, everybody, or good evening, good afternoon, wherever you're watching and whenever you're watching. Welcome. I wanted to talk for a minute just kind of what we're going to cover today in the scope of our conversation. We're going to talk about what I call the prevention to response continuum. Kind of on the left side there, we're talking about tools and solutions that we believe function well to prevent you from a threat event. And as we move across the continuum, we get to kind of in case we do have an actual event, how do we respond to that, and what are our response options? By no means is this continuum a fully baked indicator of all the solutions, all the different fundamentals that go into the prevention to response posture. But these are a few that we're going to highlight today, and we hope this information is beneficial for you. When we kind of look as a managed services provider, and we look at a layered approach for threat prevention, and email protection is certainly a fundamental of that. So we're going to start with talking about email today. And you'll see on the slide there an interesting note that according to Perception Point, business email compromise attacks rose 42% from the first half of 2023 to the first half of 2024. So, and Mike Sarah joining us from Arctic Wolf. Mike, do statistics that you guys track at Arctic Wolf support that type of increase? And if so, what vulnerabilities are you seeing as prime targets for bad actors today?
Yeah, thanks, Dave. We have our SOC team of analysts, and we do our own kind of reporting on this type of matter, from what types of incidents are we seeing, what's occurring in terms of what our teams are monitoring and helping preventing against. And so this increase, this commonality in terms of BEC attacks, also supports this. We see that even from IBM reports that 20% of organizations experience some sort of business email compromise on a given year. And what really supports that is there's been kind of an uptick in the strategy of how we can gain access into information through various phishing attempts. Different types of current events help spark these for bad actors, right? From our report, and we saw just in the month of April, a 150% increase in phishing attempts based on follow-ups to certain political events and waves there. In addition to things like AI helping make it easier for bad actors to have kind of the common language, speak the commonalities of what looks like a normal business transaction. And through our emails, we're doing a lot of important business, maybe sharing personal information or helping do transactions, gaining access to kind of confirming credentials into certain components of your business that you use. So it's a very high fidelity target for bad actors is through that email, especially if they can gain access and from the inside, from a compromising perspective, to now look like one of your own team members, for example. So these are all types of things we like to monitor and is important to monitor, but also bring awareness to on how do you help prevent against that by putting the right tooling and management around those different pieces.
Yeah, no doubt. Phishing is always present. We see it year round. There's always that threat. I kind of look at fourth quarter of this year, particularly this year, as what I call kind of a hot zone. We're in an election season. The holidays are coming up. People are out. They're spending more time buying things. They're getting inundated with emails to buy things. There's financial pressures. You want to make sure you buy that right gift for everybody. And so, I think a lot of folks wind up with their guard down and they fall victim, to that phishing email. When we talk about threat protection solutions, which one out there, Mike or Bill, which one gets us 100% protection?
Yeah, there's any part of security, there's no 100%. I think that's the real answer there, Dave, unfortunately, right? It's important to have certain levels of automation in place because there's a lot of known pieces that we can help with certain types of filtering rules. But the strongest, piece that, to uncover on top of that, and I think we'll get to, is it's also just the education of your end users to just be aware of the different attacks out there, because those are ever changing. And these types of, social methods that are used, are constantly improving. And so we need to continue to be aware of those because there is no 100%. I don't know if Bill have anything to add to that.
Yeah, I would just add, right, the awareness is probably the most important thing you can have is, be aware of what to look for in suspicious emails. Be careful on what you click, right? Don't act too quickly. A lot of these threat actors will kind of prey on urgency. They'll say, hey, your account's going to be canceled unless you click here now, or your order is going to be canceled, right? They'll try to maintain that urgency and have you click something quickly. Slow down, take a look at the details, just be vigilant.
Another common one that I see from time to time is that confirming your order for something that's a real high dollar value. So click here to confirm that this was you or not you. And so that's another one with that language that comes across there. I think, Mike, you mentioned it. How important is security awareness training as it relates to an organization's compliance program?
It's very important. It's really cornerstone to how our CISO, our Chief Information Security Officer, speaks about it, is that everyone in your organization is responsible to be part of your security team. And so, building that culture is really important, and providing the right content in a manner that's easily digestible by your team to keep them up to speed with what's going on. It's very crucial. Any sort of personnel who has access into your environment and personal data, IP, those types of things. It can even start with just that email view. And if they're a member of your organization, it's really important for them to be up to speed with that. And so finding good ways to educate the team of this importance, how to separate their personal lives from their business lives for security of both, and how these methods, come to play. Because, as you mentioned, some quick urgent thing, and we all process email quickly as in our day-to-day. Just taking that pause, as Bill mentioned, is really important to understand. Was I expecting this, right? Do I need to click on this link right now? Why would I be given this information? Does my CEO normally talk to me, or why is he asking me to buy gift cards right now, for example? Those types of things. It seems like common sense, when you hear about it, but in the moment when you're processing all this information, all the time, it's easy to just move quick, and that's where you got to take that extra scrutiny when it comes to email.
Yeah, all good points. I would kind of maybe, and we could talk about this topic probably on and on for the duration of the hour, but as we kind of, I think, wrap on this section here, one thing I would just encourage our listeners is, don't forget about SMS attacks and your cell phones. They're susceptible to those spam messages you get, and again, want you to click something to confirm an order or what have you. Just don't forget about that. It's not limited to just your PCs and computer activity. Matthew?
Thank you, gentlemen. So this now brings us to our second poll question of the day. How many security tools does your organization currently use? Again, I'll leave this up for about 30 to 40 seconds and before we move on. Leave it up about 10 more seconds. All right. So with this one, it looks like 1 to 2 is the most common, with anywhere from 3 and up being a close second and third, with a few people unsure. Now I will kick it back to Dave.
Yeah, interesting numbers there. So moving into another topic we want to talk about, multi-factor authentication. Sometimes it's referred to as two-factor authentication. And you'll see in the red box there, an interesting note. It says 99.99% of compromised accounts lack MFA. SMBs have an MFA usage rate of only 27 to 34%, according to market.us Scoop. That's a bit of a frightening statistic to me. And so, I'll throw this to you, Mike. Why do SMBs have such a low compliance rate to protect their systems and their assets in regard to MFA?
Yeah, the answer is very to that. I think the most commonality is, being that businesses are small, the level of resources they typically have dedicated to IT in general, right? They're moving quick, right? They wear a lot of different hats. And so this is, I think, a big point on where LBMC can really help, is being that extra layer of resource and process to help you prioritize these right things. Because when you're moving quick, you're adding on a bunch of new applications. You want to make sure everyone can log in. It's sometimes seems a little bit easier to not, bite into that piece of, okay, let's add this extra layer of security and an extra hoop for our teams to jump through right now. And so that feels comfortable. But I think just understanding that level of risk is really important. And there's layers to this, right? In terms of how you can, do that in a way that still doesn't impact your operations as much. And that's really by thinking of, where are the key control, components of my environment that need the tightest restrictions of access. So let's start there, right?
Yeah.
And who actually needs to access those? Who needs an account to those pieces of information? And formulating that plan really helps make it a lot more clear and sustainable on how you can manage towards getting to, having that MFA everywhere where it's necessary. So those are the components that go into it for sure.
Yeah, I think one of the things too around some SMBs either resistant to it or not adopting is that I just don't think they think they're a target. And so, the added layer of another step to authenticate, it's taken time for me to do what I need to do, and albeit, minimal time. I think they see that as a minor inconvenience. So Bill, what about, organizations whose executives resist MFA for themselves? Why is that a bad idea?
Yeah, well, executives are one of the first targets, right? If they, if a threat actor can get into an executive's account, then they're typically going to have more access than others. They're going to be able to launch those business email compromises, right? They're going to be able to target other employees with the executive's account, saying, "Hey, I need you to do this, or I need you to buy me these gift cards," or whatever the case is, and then it's really coming from that person's account. So, yeah, I mean, executives, I think they're the ones that probably need it the most, but MFA really needs to be a requirement for everyone at this point.
Yeah,
Well,
I 100% agree.
one thing I'd like to add here too is that
Yeah.
there's been a large technological advancement in MFA that has made it a lot easier for organizations. And I think that awareness, it needs to be out there as well. Just many of these, native applications, Microsoft baking it into their products. We all have phones that we can use to help with these types of authentications. It's become a lot easier than the old days of you needing to get an RSA token or something like that and punch in the number at the right time and not miss it. So it's definitely come a long way.
The old key fob, right? Which sometimes we still have clients that really prefer that, and it's rare, but that does happen. I'll throw this to both of you. We'll go maybe Bill first. How important is it for IT leadership to educate their executives and continue to educate the executive leaders as to the target that they present to bad actors?
I mean, I think it should be one of the top priorities because, this goes back to the email security topic around awareness, right? Just that ongoing training and that awareness is so important. You mentioned it before, Dave, that some people might think, oh, we're too small to be a target, right? No one's gonna care about us. We're a 10-person business, whatever the case is. It's not the case, right? They're the ones that are the targets. These threat actors out there are not just individuals anymore. They're organized businesses, right? They have targets. They're coming after the small businesses. So yeah, the awareness super important. IT staff making sure they're educating the executives really should be a top priority.
Yeah. Mike, any other thoughts on that, on educating executives?
Yeah, I think it just comes down to talking to the level that is important to them and what they understand. And that's typically more on the business risk side of things. That's really what this whole conversation is about, is when you think about prevention to response, it's, how do we reduce the likelihood of an incident happening, and how do we limit the impact? And so this is something that really heavily reduces it, seeing the statistics of the likelihood of something happening. And that is a quantifiable number that can go towards that. And that's really, I think, what will help speak to them and get to that level of understanding, which is a big part of our conversations is this is about, reducing that risk. And there's only a certain amount that you can do from a, transfer aspect when you talk about things like insurance, but there is a lot you can do to help with the insurance, as well as just having the correct amount of operations and tooling and personnel to drive those things. So
yeah, well, thanks for that lead in, because my next question was about cyber insurance. And actually, I'll kind of speak to the audience here. I'm not sure how many of you are in organizations that have a cyber insurance policy that's been issued for your organization. Obviously we see it quite often, and often assist our clients with completing those applications for cyber insurance. So question for you guys is, how do cyber insurance underwriters view the importance of MFA? And I'll have a follow-up on that, but where do they see that positioned as far as how they look at underwriting a policy?
yeah, in terms of, the partners that we work with and insurance brokers, this is one of the top 5 on the list of requirements, right? In terms of sometimes even gaining any sort of insurability, but definitely a reasonable, plan in terms of, how much coverage you have, and then that impacts your premium as well. Because that's what these statistics show, right? That is exactly what, an insurance company is monitoring is the risk to them taking on that partner. And so knowing how much that MFA can impact that, if you have that implemented, if you can check that box, that automatically moves you forward into a certain line of coverage and availability amongst a lot of different things in security, but definitely MFA has been there as one of those key items for a long time.
Yeah, a couple thoughts on that. I know when I see these applications, when I'm working with a client on an application, not only is the question is, are you using an MFA solution? Then they'll continue the question will be, well, which one of these will be a drop down maybe on the application? Which one of these MFA solutions are you using? They're really wanting to nail down that you're doing it, and that you're doing it with a product that's known. So there's an interesting case that occurred, I think, out of Indiana a couple of years ago, where an organization had attested to having MFA, and then they were subsequently breached and didn't have. It was found in the forensics that it was an MFA breach where MFA wasn't present for the breached account. Kind of not a good position you want to be in. But what risks does an organization have for attesting that they've got MFA compliance without actually doing it?
Yeah, I mean, that's where it can terminate the amount of coverage that you can get in terms of that response, right? If you get there, that that's part of the game of insurance, is ensuring that you held up to your end of the bargain when they gave you that premium and that level of coverage. And obviously, in terms of just business losses alone and how you're recovering from that, there's other factors that come into play, like your own reputation, what you've been able to support, the customer bases that you've grown to. So the questions are there for a reason, not just to check a box. And that's why they're even getting more scrutiny. They want to be transparent as possible with this from an insurance um, plan. It used to be just MFA on your emails. Now there's, like you said, more drop downs. They've expanded this into, well, are you monitoring? Can you produce an access control policy type reporting against this, of how you're actually monitoring and setting up who has permissions to access to these things.
Yeah.
So it definitely all plays in there, but it's all going into that factor of what trying to prevent that risk in the first place. The average breach, according to IBM reports in the past year, is $4.5 million to an organization. And so these can amount to a large amount of numbers, because that includes all those things, not just what it costs from a ransom payment or shutting down your business, all these other factors of getting your systems back up and running, and those types of operational risks as well.
Yeah, loss of reputation and all that kind of stuff that's even hard to measure. I would just to maybe put a bow on that topic, just encourage our listeners and our audience again, that if you do have a cyber insurance policy, just be very certain that you're attesting to solutions that you have in place, and review it annually. You may add solutions during the course of a year that you weren't able to attest to in the prior submission, so you can add that additional context to a policy renewal. So very important topic, I think, there.
Absolutely.
All right.
Dave, real quick, sorry to interrupt. Before we move off MFA, there was a question that came in from the audience that I did want to have you all address. They were asking, do we see MFA going away in favor of biometrics?
I'm not sure I'm going to be well versed to say that it's going to completely be replaced by biometrics. I think we see some of that in our personal use. I know in corporate space there's a certain element of that as well. But every time you use your fingerprint to authenticate on your cell phone or your mobile device, that would be an indication there of where biometrics is in play. I don't know, guys, what do you think about that as far as traditional MFA and biometrics?
Yeah, I mean, personally, I think of biometrics kind of as a form of MFA, right? It's not, if you have anything beyond just your password, you're getting into MFA territory, right? So MFA doesn't necessarily just have to be, the code or the token, right? I mean, Dave, you mentioned before the key fobs with the tokens, right? For the most part, we've mainly moved past that into authenticator apps. Well, biometrics might be the next step past that, but biometrics, that to me, that's a type of MFA.
Yeah, good. Mike, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, pretty much in alignment with Bill there, right? It's how is evolution? I think the challenge with the password is beyond what we've kind of seen in the trends of how bad actors have been able to get access to those informations in terms of dark web sharing and stuff like that. That's what's forced this need, right? And evolutions of quantum computing and those things in the future, right? Who knows what that'll bring as what is going to be the best authentication method, but that's what we're always keeping up with. And I think these biometrics really help in terms of a form of identity. I know where possible, it might be a stronger form than even just your phone, right? In terms of being able to spoof that. So to Bill's point, it's kind of layered into, what is the strength that the industry needs today. And this is definitely a step up from just a string of a password. So
yeah. Certainly that technology has been around for many years, whether it's optical or voice print or fingerprints, all that. It's been around for some time, and it'll be interesting to see how it all evolves as we progress through life here. All right, Matthew. All right, so moving into discussion around managed patching, and that's one of the fundamentals of good IT governance is a managed patching program, and making sure that your systems are getting security patched in a timely method. The note there that you'll see in the red box again, Adaptiva and the Ponemon Institute have found that 59% of IT practitioners say it takes at least 2 weeks to bring deployment of a patch after release, leaving a wide window for attacks. Now, I'm not sure the context on that note for a 2-week gap, and if that really relates to critical patches or not. I know that we at LBMC, we're going to get critical patches out much in advance of a 2-week window. But many organizations allow for a bit of maturing from Microsoft Patch Tuesday until deployment. And if you throw in any governance around sandboxing and testing and things of that could be every bit of 2 weeks, whether it's a critical patch or not. So I'll start with the question around, what are some of the fundamentals, Bill? What are some fundamentals of a sound patch management solution?
Yeah, I think, when it comes to a sound patch management solution, that, automation is important, right? So not relying on someone that's going to manually just go to each system and patch, right? You need a centralized system that's going to push out those patches and not only push them out, but ensure the testing, the identification of which patches are missing, and installation across the systems. Scheduling is important. I think making sure that patches are not interrupting the workday, right? Again, if it's patching is important, so making sure they're applied is important, but interrupting the workday and causing loss of productivity isn't a good thing, and that's going to lead businesses to say, hey, I don't want you doing this, right? I don't want these patches installed. It causes my productivity to go down. So scheduling those for off hours, making sure that they're scheduled when work's not being done is important to minimize disruptions. Assessing severity and impact, I think, is important as well. Some patches, maybe they could wait a little bit longer, right? Maybe they could wait a week or so, but those critical patches, those security patches, it's important to get those out quick, right? It's really about reducing the attack surface for the bad guys. They're going to be targeting those systems. They're going to be targeting, not just Windows systems, but firewalls. We've seen plenty of times where someone will get into an unpatched firewall and into the network from there. They end up on an endpoint. It's important not only to patch your systems, but hardware as well.
Yeah, one of the things that we have to balance with our clients as well around patch schedules and all that's involved with that is the actual, a lot of times to apply patches, it's going to require a reboot of a system, whether that's a server or workstation. And you're right, there's inconvenience depending on how long a reboot and those applied patches take. They don't want somebody sitting there for 15, 20, 30 minutes waiting for that patch process to finish. So balancing that with when's a good time to patch, but when's a good time to reboot those systems so that those patches can all be applied properly is something we have to balance as a managed services provider. When we think about patching and the importance that it has in a healthy IT governance, how have any new technologies, specifically AI or artificial intelligence, how have those plugged any gaps in that reference 2-week timeline that it takes for a lot of patches to be deployed? Does AI play a part in maybe some parallel technologies where we have some protection besides solely the patch?
Yeah, I mean, I think with AI, what we could do is maybe more quickly identify what are any type of, what are the critical vulnerabilities? Where do we need to apply those patches first? Which systems might be at the most risk? In addition to that, I think that using AI might help with some of the testing, making sure that if there is going to be an issue, that it's identified quickly and we're able to expedite that testing process, right? I think a lot of the time the delay that it takes isn't because people are lazy. It's not because people don't want to install. It's because they want to do the testing, right? They don't want to push out a patch and have a network go down or lose a day's productivity because their systems aren't booting. So I think the testing and using AI to accelerate some of that could be an important aspect of it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Mike, any thoughts you have on patching?
Yeah, I think on top of the patching, what the driver to that, and time to what Bill was talking about is, how are we analyzing severities, is making sure you have the right, breadth and timing of scanning to identify what needs to be patched, right? And that is also an ever-changing model, having the right process around looking at the different aspects of external, internal, and that the host to see the full gambit of that, and doing that on a more continuous process as possible will allow you to frame that out. And I think just getting that into a common nature and enveloping into your plan, as we talked about, is going to be really important. We actually get information from our incident response side of things, a team that analyzes, customers or, companies that have gotten breached, how to recover, what was the cause of that root compromise analysis. And, 60% of, some sort of external exposure was because of a patch that wasn't updated and that was over a year old, right? And so making sure you have the right visibility to this, because even that, that's a very long amount of time. So if you don't have the right visibility to even see that in the first place and know that that might be a higher severity item, that should be in your continuous plan. If you're only doing annual type scans or quarterly type scans, that can lead to this risk. And it kind of goes back to the same question about, that inconvenience versus what risk do I want to accept? Well, a person making a mistake on email and an external vulnerability are the two most common ways that an organization is breached. So if you want to make the most impact to reducing the likelihood of an incident, those are going to be the things to look at and make sure you have good processes around and work towards building and optimizing that plan.
Yeah. Again, speaking to our audience here, I'll speak first from a managed services provider standpoint. One of the things, one of the tools that's core to our business is what we'll call an RMM, or remote management and monitoring solution. And that's our solution that allows us to not only remotely support your machines, or rather, to be able to actually log on to your machine and do some support for you while you see us do our thing. That also allows us to manage the patching that happens with your workstations. Bill mentioned it earlier around, systems that can then report back where patches are missing. We can get all of that data from within our RMM system, where we know the level of patching that's occurred, if there's been any missed patches, how to mitigate and come back behind and do that. So my word to you is that if you're working with a managed services provider and your support and your IT support, that should be a service that they're certainly offering, and can report back to you on the validity of your patching that's occurring. If you're in a corporate environment where that's you've got IT in-house, that should still be a fundamental of your IT team. And if you're in that executive space, that might be a report or a metric that you'd want to see on some kind of recurring basis to ensure that your environment's getting patched appropriately. All right.
Perfect. So that brings us to our third poll question of today, and that is asking about who manages your current security stack. And again, I will leave this up for about 45 seconds. Leave it up for about 10 more seconds. All right, gonna go ahead and close it. Looks like the majority of the people will manage it internally. A couple either use an MSP wholly or partner with an MSP, and then a couple people say what's security. So it's a bit concerning.
Wow. Okay.
All right, Dave, I'll kick it back over to you again.
Yeah. All right. Thanks. So, in our next section here, we're talking about next generation endpoint protection and anti-malware. So, and again, pointing your attention to the red box there, according to strongdm.com, malware is the most common type of cyber attack aimed at small businesses. And that was, I think, echoed in our first poll there, that most of our audience is most concerned about malware. We've talked about threat management, and when you often hear about that, there's a lot of for many years we kind of envisioned whether they were somebody domestic or foreign, that it's somebody in their basement hacking away on their computer trying to break into an environment somewhere. But the fact is that we're not talking about lone actors when we talk about a bad actor. We're talking about a group or an entity that's taking on a whole organizational approach to threat and breach activities, often, and I'll use the term in quotes, with employees that and they're managing revenue targets and SLAs in order to collect ransom. So it's gotten quite sophisticated. If you read any of the threat management materials that are often published, these organizations have names. They're known named entities in their quote business activities as far as threat activities go. So, we've talked about protecting email with threat protection products, MFA. But if an organization falls victim to a breach event, there's some metrics that indicate how long the bad actor camps out in your environment. That's called dwell time, as to how long they sit out there. Some of the older metrics from 2020 was about 11 days. In 2021, 15 days. The average dwell time now is about 51 days in an SMB that has under 250 employees. So the question to you, Bill, to start, can you speak to any experience that you've had dealing with clients who've had a bad actor threat breach occur, and how they've worked through managing that breach event and the demands of the bad actor?
Yeah, for sure. So, that's typical situation that our SOC at Huntress deals with pretty much on a daily basis, right? Is working through these threat scenarios. Like you said, Dave, typically they're going to get in and not just immediately launch some type of attack, right? They're going to dwell in there for a little bit to see what they can find, kind of see what's going on in the network. Something they use is persistence, right? They're trying to get a foothold in that environment so that doesn't matter if someone reboots, doesn't matter if they take the machine to a different location, right? If they can get persistence in the network, then now they have ongoing access, and that's when they're gonna monitor, kind of see what's going on. You mentioned before using an RMM to manage patching. Bad actors will use something very similar, right? They'll use command and control software to basically monitor systems, kind of see what's going on, see where they can see what else they can do, what other damage they can cause. And like you said, they're not individuals, right? They're organized crime at this point. They're businesses. They have targets for their ransom. They're going to work through launching those attacks, collecting that ransom. It's well organized.
Yeah, and we've seen in client space at LBMC, we've seen those attacks hit distribution. We've seen it hit financial services. We've seen it hit a variety of sectors. So healthcare is often a target. And there's just no end to which sectors the bad actors will target. Everybody's is an equal opportunity victim. You hear sometimes folks will say that there's two types of organizations: those who've been breached and those who haven't yet. And that's kind of a scary thought. We would like to think that in our client base that we're doing everything we can to protect them, and I think for a large part we're doing a pretty good job at that. But ultimately, we're into that. We're on that end of that continuum that I referenced on the front end, that these things do happen. A bad click happens, a vulnerability is attacked and breached, and now we're moving into that section of how do you respond to that? Mike, what about from an Arctic Wolf standpoint, and kind of dealing with a breach event and how you guys might have seen that play out with the client?
Yeah, I first like to say kind of referencing the ports again, you're spot on with some of the data that we've seen has held true in our own, and in terms of the incident response cases that have come into Arctic Wolf, about 50% of them revolve around ransomware. Even though, in terms of the overall claims, it's like 10 times as likely to have, some sort of like business email compromise, for example, because it can result in a greater impact, shutting down your business, more endpoints locked out, ransom to continue it. And so in terms of a recovery standpoint, I think this is where it's really important to kind of think about, from at that first starting of, what does that worst day look like, and building that incident response plan. If you haven't put time towards that yet, that is where if you look at the NIST framework strategies, that's the best place to start. Is if that worst day were to come, how would we recover from that situation? And likely that involves looping in your insurance, using things like backup, but aligning to a response plan of maybe having a forensics team or someone come into play. And that's an area where we can help assist in terms of recovering. And that's all about helping isolate to reduce additional impact, helping identify that root compromise. So then making sure that we know where this begins, so something doesn't stay persistent. It does involve things like, engaging with that ransomware team. As you mentioned, their businesses, they have chatbots now that you can actually talk to, and they're, genuine and ask, here's your payment, and how do you want to, distribute that to us over Bitcoin, and so this is part of that forensics team strategies, is actually maybe using that as a delay tactic, or working with that team on how to reduce those ransom demands, because they're expert in this. And so making sure you have the right team to help with reducing that as much as possible is a good starting point. And then from there, working more proactively, adding things like your EDR and more general operations, right? The more pieces that you can put together from an operations to help with earlier detection of these things is going to be important. Whether that's at the endpoint, I think one data piece from our SOC was that, the most common use case for early detection was, seeing some sort of authentication alert as well. So pairing those all together is going to help you with that process of detecting this earlier and stopping it from getting there in the first place. But making sure you're starting with that incident response plan is a good way to start, to make sure that I can build proactive from there.
Yeah. There's a couple of questions in the chat, and I think I'm gonna hit the last one first, because we are hitting around some of these points right now. And the question was, what are the actual steps to take when or if a ransomware event happens? Comment was, feel like we've kind of talked around some tangible steps, but can you maybe hit the in order? What are the top 5 things that you need to accomplish to kind of get in front of or respond to a breach event?
Yeah.
I'd say the first.
Go ahead,
Well,
Bill.
I was just going to say I think the first thing is engage incident response, right? You need to have an incident response plan and enact that incident response plan. This, like you said before, it shouldn't be a case of kind of if this happens. You should plan for when it happens, and you should have an incident response plan ready.
And detailed in that incident response plan is typically who to call and get involved, who's the point personnel of your environment, identifying those critical assets. But that'll typically involve that there's an actual incident response team that can help right away with scoping out the event. But then it will also begin the process of tying into your insurance, bringing this up, helping them identify, do I need to make a claim right now? Those types of things. You want to get all those pieces in motion. If you have that planned out, it goes a lot quicker. There's less quick decisions around, what is the best rate for recovery right now? Having those identified ahead of time is going to help you in the best case to really, get that break glass button for you wrapped up. So
yeah, I think, and this is just kind of off the top of my head as well. I think it's in that detection, and then your response starts with how do you contain it, how you mitigate it, potentially then mitigation to remediation, but you're engaging with insurance, forensics who would need to dive in, and then ultimately how do you recover, whether that's simply by mitigation and remediation things to eradicate the threat, or do you have to go back and perform any kind of system restoration to recover back to pre-breach event. So that's at a very high level, and I know the question probably begs more content than that, but it's really in the response to containment, remediation, and then recovery. It would be probably your major fundamentals there. The other question that came in, and I want to make sure we honor that one, is for client moving toward a zero trust model, what foundational elements should be prioritized to ensure all layers from email security to endpoint protection are cohesive? Good question. Thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think in a case like that, maybe partnering with someone like LBMC that knows all the different pieces and how they fit together might be important. There's a lot of tools out there, right? And I think that was part of the poll earlier. How many tools are you using, right? There's very few that only said they were using 1 to 2 tools. There's a lot out there, and I think partnering with someone that kind of knows how those pieces fit together and how they've proven they fit together with other clients is important. So I'd say, work with a trusted advisor, whether that's a managed service provider like LBMC, or whether that's maybe a cybersecurity firm. I would say partner with someone that kind of has done it and knows how they fit together.
Yeah. I would add in, this was really not part of what we were covering today, but in the SIM space that we partner with Arctic Wolf on, we've got the variety of product solutions that make up our security stack, and we're able to leverage a SIM product to consolidate reporting and logging from all of those solutions, kind of give us that one pane of glass. So getting to that, how do they all become cohesive? They may be from all different manufacturers, but if we have the ability to have a single pane of glass to view what's coming and being logged accordingly, that gives us a little bit more of a cohesive view of that threat management. I think we need to move in probably to our last section. Matthew, is there another poll there? Not yet. Okay. All right. Well, so we're kind of to that point where we've had a breach event. We kind of alluded to it there in the last section and talking about kind of incident response and if you do actually have to do a recovery. And we're going to talk a bit about disaster recovery and backup. But again, pointing your attention to the red box there. In a ransomware trends report, 97% of ransomware attacks fail to infect backups. That's actually not a bad note. Sorry for the 3%, and we may be talking a little bit to the 3% here, but 97% is actually a good number around that. So, as we've talked about protecting your environment, and you find yourself kind of dealing with the real breach event with a bad actor demanding payment for return of your data or for threatening to release your data. The question is, how good are your backups? Right. And so fundamentally, there's some things that should be in place with your backup solution. 4 things I'm going to point out in particular. Credentials to those backups should not be connected to Active Directory. They should be segmented from Active Directory. And, if you had Active Directory compromise, your backups potentially are going to be compromised. Backups should be stored off of your network. They shouldn't be on your network necessarily. And whether that's locally or in the cloud, your backups need to have that level segmentation. Backups should be immutable. That means that they cannot be altered in any way. And then lastly, the ability to restore them rapidly to production systems. So as far as this webinar goes, we don't have LBMC's partner for backup solutions on there. We do partner with Datto for a number of different backup solutions. And so, for on-premise server environments, that architecture is basically an appliance that sits in the environment. Backups are written to that and then is replicated offsite or to the cloud, to their cloud location. So it's important, and we look at that as a sound model around that, because that cloud replication further provides some segmentation in the event that you've got a physical disaster folks in Florida have been dealing with hurricanes. As I'm a Florida native and certainly well aware of the damage that occurs here in Middle Tennessee. We live under the threat of tornadoes a couple times a year. But whether it's fire, flood, what have you, if your facility is damaged, and that appliance where your backups sit is damaged, well then that cloud replication provides you access to those backups should you need to restore. So Bill, kind of regardless of the solution, have you seen clients that rely on a backup from a cyber threat event? And if so, did the backup solution meet the demand?
Yeah. I mean, so backups are really the one good way to know that you recover from a cyber attack, right? Anytime there's a cyber attack, there's always going to be the question of, is there something else left behind? Is there something else on another system that you didn't catch, right? I mean, restoring from backup is kind of the best practice following a cyber attack to make sure that you restored from a known good backup. So yes, definitely have run into that where, unfortunately, ransomware will happen, and restoring from a backup does get them back up and running. Like you said, Dave, I mean, making sure you have immutable backups, making sure that they're not linked to Active Directory, making sure that you have them replicated to a cloud, all best practices to make sure that if it does come to that, you're ready.
Yeah, good. Mike, any additional thoughts on backup and recovery?
Yeah, I just think kind of going along with what we were talking about with having the plan is, having the right pieces and knowing what data to back up is really important, but kind of aligning to the detection and forensics that goes into that. We want to make sure we're going to be rolling back to a backup that was, prior to when that compromise began, right? And so that is really important to that process, right? We don't want to be just redeploying the same issue that could then happen again. So making sure that's strategized with your plans and your DR components there is the other important aspect there.
Yeah, and again, we weren't necessarily covering the DR plan in as much detail as we could in the context of time here, but I would strongly recommend to have a disaster recovery plan. We work through this all the time with our clients and just in defining what a relevant disaster recovery plan is for them. And we've got folks from all over the country on this webinar. And so, I referenced a couple of environmental type things, in Florida, clients down there, they have to prepare for disasters around a hurricane, and what do you do in the event of a hurricane? So a disaster plan for folks in Florida should be specific to what happens in the event of a hurricane. Here in Middle Tennessee, again, we deal with flood, we deal with tornado. And so we write disaster recovery plans that are focused on those type things. And what I guess I'm getting at is that everybody's risk factor around a potential disaster is going to be different. And you can't plan for every type disaster. Prior to 2020, I doubt anybody had global pandemic on their disaster recovery bingo card as far as writing a disaster recovery plan. So, you have to assess basically what is your risk element for where you live, where your assets are, where your enterprise is, and write that disaster recovery plan. I usually recommend for finding, the top 3 risk factors. And over time, we try to write disaster recovery plans that are specific to addressing the top 3 risk factors for a client. And I think if you do that, and drill that on a repetitive basis year over year, you're going to refine your plans. You're going to find that if you do actually have a disaster event occur, that you're going to already have done the legwork to know what to step through in getting your business back online and recovered. So I think that we're getting close to time. I want to make sure that we give you time, Matthew, to wrap up. But and I'll just say, on behalf of the guys, thank you for attending today.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you as well. Thank you, Dave, Bill, and Mike. We do have just one final poll question to launch. And it's just as part of attending this webinar, as a thank you, we are extending a special offer, virtual lunch and learn. You'll get lunch delivered to your place of work. And we would just love to learn more about your organization and your current cybersecurity stance. And again, I will leave this up for about 45 seconds or so, and then we will go ahead and wrap up for the day. And I do want to note, there were a couple questions that we just ran out of time. We are unable to answer them. But if you email us at info@lbmctech.com, we can go ahead and get those answered. And then I've also taken some notes from some of the people who did reach out, and I will be sending out additional information to address those questions. I'm going to go ahead and close the poll here. All right. Again, thank you, Mike, Bill, and Dave. We have covered a ton of content today. If there are any questions that anyone can think of after, please reach out to us either through our website or our email, which is right there on the screen, info@lbmctech.com. Again, a final reminder, we will be sending out an email in a couple of days with links both to the recording and the presentation. As well as a survey. Please, again, complete that survey as you reassess or assess your cybersecurity posture. We are always here to help. And again, thank you all for attending today's webinar. We hope you have a great day.